Hello and welcome to A Sound Constitution here in CHLY 101.7 FM, a show where we focus on health topics important to our community. This year's team is made up of 8 VIU BSN students. Our goal is to demystify health issues and address common misconceptions by sharing evidence-informed information from a variety of reliable resources. All information provided on our show will be available in our show notes on our Facebook and Instagram pages. We want to remind our listeners that the information presented in this show is for educational purposes only and does not replace the advice of your primary healthcare professional. If you have any questions or concerns about what's being discussed, feel free to reach out to us on Facebook at A Sound Constitution, Instagram at CHLY A Sound Constitution, all one word, or email us at asoundconstitution@gmail.com.
We would like to start our show by acknowledging that we are on the unceded territory of the Nanaimo people, with a broadcasting range that overlaps the Kiwetsun and Sli-Aman territories. This acknowledgement is done with gratitude to the Nanaimo people and with the intention to increase awareness about truth and reconciliation processes and efforts on Vancouver Island. Additional information and resources surrounding Nanaimo history, reconciliation protocol, and land acknowledgement can be found on our Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube pages.
Hello everyone, thank you for tuning in to our show. I'm Shan, your host for today's episode, and I'm joined with my co-hosts Stella, Luke, and Cedric. In this episode, we'll be discussing an essential topic in women's health that affects billions around the world, the menstrual health. It is something that all women experience, but it's often surrounded by confusion and silence. So today, we'll cover the basics of the menstrual cycle, address issues like period poverty and menstrual hygiene, and clear up common misconceptions around it. We'll also talk about what's normal versus what's not, and share tips on nutrition to support the body during menstruation. So let's dive in and start shedding light on periods. To start this episode, let's talk about an important topic related to menstruation that affects millions worldwide, the period poverty. Here's my co-host Stella to tell us more.
Let's take a break to talk about period poverty. So let's start with what that even is. Period poverty is defined by the Government of Canada as a lack of access to safe and hygienic menstrual products, education, hygiene facilities, waste management, or a combination of these things. The overall cost of having a period is one of the main issues people face with menstruation, as products such as pads, tampons, Diva cups, and pain medication can be very pricey. In a study done by Ledger and Plan International Canada in 2023, it shows that 25% of women who menstruate have been forced to make the decision between menstrual products and essentials such as food or rent in the year of 2023. There is also an overall lack of knowledge about correct hygiene practices, which is partly due to the lack of access to correct information. This leaves many people unaware of what's supposed to occur during menstruation versus what's potentially worrisome, what products are best for them to use and how to use them properly, as well as general menstrual hygiene. Teens have very few places to turn for reliable information and may never know when to seek help if they're unaware of what a normal period should look like. In Canada, 51% of women feel like their menstrual health education did not cover what they need to know. Partly why this education is so lackluster is due to the stigma surrounding menstruation. Men are often vastly unaware of information surrounding menstruation as it's viewed as gross or taboo. This also leaves women and girls afraid to ask questions or seek out information as they have a fear of being judged or made fun of. 51% of women aged 18 to 24 have felt the need to hide their period at home, while 59% have had to hide the fact that they're on their period at school or work. And 46% of women overall have experienced or witnessed negative comments or jokes about menstruation or PMS. However, there is a lot we can do to address period poverty, such as advocating for reduced or abolished taxes on menstrual products, free menstrual products in public places, policies that promote menstrual health information through social media ads, and during sex education regardless of the sex, as everyone's aware of how critical this issue is. And another is just advocating that researchers should be able to collect more data and information regarding menstrual health and making it freely available. The Government of Canada is already engaging in a 4-phase plan to address barriers related to to affordability and stigma, but it's our job to continue to advocate for ourselves and raise awareness for this issue and making it less taboo by speaking freely about it.
Now that we have explored period poverty, let's talk about another critical aspect that contributes to this issue, the period shame. To shed light on this, we'll be sharing an audio from a TED Talk titled Let's Put an End to Menstrual Shame, Period by Molly Fenton. Molly Fenton is a dynamic women's health activist from the UK, best known for launching the Love Your Period campaign to challenge stigma and promote understanding. She is currently working with the Welsh Government on a period dignity strategic action plan aiming to improve access to menstrual products and eliminate period poverty by 2026. In her TED Talk, Molly discusses how societal stigma around menstruation harms individuals and calls for collective action to break the silence. Let's listen to her powerful message.
How many of you are on your period right now? I can see heads turning, looking down. Now isn't the time to tune out. I do understand the reaction. After all, this is a very private matter. But why? Why should something as normal and essential as menstruation be shrouded in silence? This isn't just a women's problem. It's a human problem, despite gender and across generations. Are you feeling a little awkward? Uncomfortable? Good. That reaction is exactly what we need to talk about. Half of our human population experiences periods. In fact, the United Nations Population Fund tells us that 800 million people are on their period today. But that's probably not something you would choose to share. It's not exactly dinner table conversation, is it? Growing up in the 21st century, I've had the women in my life conceal this crimson curse. Such a secretive matter from the moment it began. And we do go to some extraordinary measures to not even say the word period. The Blob. Shark Week. Girl Flu. Code Red. And potentially the most creative I have heard, explosive pum pum time. I'd like you to think back, those of you in the room who have periods. Do you remember when you started menstruating? I believe many of us would associate periods with preteen, maybe 12 years old. Some of you may have been older, some may be younger. In my case, I was 4 years younger. At 8 years old, I started my period. I was in year 3. It was a terrifying and quite frankly traumatizing experience. I had never been told what a period was, so I thought I was going to die. I'd learned to associate blood with trauma, and I knew it was always a bad sign, so I panicked. Not knowing what to do, stuck in those junior school toilets we'd only just moved up to in year 3, so I couldn't put my feet on the ground. I knew I had to get back to the classroom, worried my teacher was going to shout at me for being too long. Yet tears were streaming down my face because this blood must be bad. It wasn't long after the stomach pain began and I was sat hunched over on the toilet in too much pain for my small body to handle at that age. Now I know what you're thinking. 8 years old, that's extremely young, isn't it? And you're right, it is. But it is in the healthy limits for a child to start their period. However, in May 2024, period education was proposed to be banned until year 5, 9 and 10 years old, under the new draft guidance of the sex education plan. Banned. Strong word, isn't it? What is so inappropriate about periods? About a girl understanding the expected changes that will happen to her body, that the topic itself cannot be brought up despite many starting before that time. I didn't learn all that much about periods in my 15 years of education. 10 of them I had periods for. 15 years on from my first period, and lessons still have not been learnt from the girls that went home from school crying to their parents, thinking they were going to die. When I was in school, the period chat came under PSHE, Personal, Social, Health and Economic Education. But we all just referred to it as sex ed. And yes, periods came under the sex education bracket. But I propose that this is part of the cause of the stigma and the sexual objectification in itself. And we really have to separate periods and sex, especially in the education setting. As a teenager, I was taught how to use a condom on 3 separate occasions. But no one ever taught me how to use a tampon or any period products, for that matter. Quite an alarming gender education gap there, wouldn't you agree? One where a girl's sex education is more focused on contact with the opposite gender than her own body. My friends and I now joke and laugh about waddling awkwardly like penguins the first time we'd inserted tampons incorrectly. I'd gone swimming with my dad and had unexpectedly started. I was too embarrassed to say to him, so I went to go buy tampons because I didn't want to miss out on the fun. I stood in the shop with an array of brands, sizes, colours and scents being sold to me, and ended up buying the heaviest flow and biggest tampons available. I used a YouTube video in the changing rooms of how to put it in me. It wasn't a great experience. I was 14 years old. By this point, I had been taught how to use a condom, but not a tampon. I remember in school when the instruction manual was removed from my box of tampons just in case the boys got hold of it, implying that the sexual nature of these anatomical diagrams of how to safely use tampons was a bigger concern than the safety of my physical well-being. These period products were provided under a free period product scheme, mainly for disadvantaged and underserved school pupils, with potential of negative hygiene practice, infections, and even toxic shock syndrome from using products like tampons for too long. You would have assumed that this would be a priority for girls' health and not a potential pornographic exposure. We leave open a large gap for myths and misconceptions to be perceived as reality and passed down through generations. A misconception I hear all the time is around the use of tampons taking away virginity, which in itself is an extremely complicated social and cultural construct, but it is damaging to the right for us to have the correct information about our bodies. The use of tampons has nothing to do with virginity, and educating about these topics means that we can reduce and even end this cycle of misinformation. On the flip side of all this, where and when did the fascination of periods in a sexual light be inflicted onto the boys? It's hard to blame them being curious to a certain extent when we deny them the correct information of what periods are and what they really mean. They'd see the girls be taken into a separate room for a quick girls' talk. They come out horrified, and they're told not to talk about what came up in that room on the playground afterwards. Automatically, those of us in that room think that what came up is wrong to talk about, and we're embarrassed. And this only made the boys even more curious. See, we're identifying a cycle, and not one that just makes this a girl's issue. I truly believe that the sexual connotations we have around periods are adding to this cycle of objectifying a woman's body, except now, it's a girl's body. It sounds so wrong, linking sex to first periods, doesn't it? In my case, we're talking about linking sex to an 8-year-old child. But that is what is happening. Of course you wouldn't teach an 8-year-old about sex, but I don't understand why we wouldn't teach them about periods and the normal changes that will happen to their bodies. And I'm not talking about the science and getting a 3D pelvis out, but more that big sister-like chat, so that when these changes do happen to them, they don't scare them. In my time in sex ed, I was taught about condom use, recycling, consent, and drug and alcohol use. When I was 13 years old, I was taught how to use a condom properly for the first time. No one taught me how to use a tampon or any period products before leaving education at 18 years old. Why do we learn about condoms and how to use them properly? For our health and safety. And so we have to learn about periods and what these changes in our body are supposed to look like. Without this education around periods, we don't know our normal. We are deprived of the opportunity to help ourselves live the same quality of life on our periods as we do off. In order to be and stay healthy, we have to establish what is okay and what isn't. Period pain, it's very common, so it must be normal, right? As with heavy periods, very common, must be normal. This is just what we call the joys of being a woman. It's normal for a girl to miss up to a week off school every month, vomiting, passing out, scared to leave her house because she seems to leak through every pad and tampon available. Right? This is how I live my life on my period, and I know I'm not the only one. The charity Wellbeing of Women's December 2023 study of 3,001 12 to 18-year-olds revealed that 97% experience painful periods. 92% have such heavy periods that they have to change their daily activities. Chronic menstrual conditions are seen as just a period. The charity Endometriosis UK documents the average diagnosis time for endometriosis in the UK as 8 years and 10 months. The 2024 survey of more than 4,000 people with the condition revealed that almost half visited their GP 10 times or more before being diagnosed. Period inequity is quite literally taking away the right to a young person's education. PHS Group, our leading provider for hygiene services in the UK, documents in October 2023 that an average of 3 days per term is missed of school because of periods. That's more than the common cold. My last intention is to make anyone feel uncomfortable. But we're all deeply ingrained with this fear-like perception of menstruation. Women, and people in the room who have periods, stop hiding it. Paint the realities of menstruation to people around you. It will probably make your lives easier. And men, it's blood. We see an abundance of it in traumatic ways on television. So we can start to accept that menstruation is normal, and it's actually played an essential part of why we are all able to sit here today. I still cannot believe that it wasn't until 2016 an actual period pad was shown on television. And it took until 2017 for red and not blue liquid to represent periods. Periods are not a weakness. What do you mean? I get to bleed for a week, every month, and not die? How awesome is that? I do wish someone had painted it to me as that strength when I was that scared 8-year-old girl. Periods include us all. And if we continue to treat them as something that should be whispered about or ignored, then we miss out on the opportunity to normalise them, to educate properly, and to remove the stigma for the 8-year-old girl that's about to start her period, prioritising her equality over our discomfort.
Again, that was a TED Talk titled Let's Put an End to Menstrual Shame Period by Molly Fenton, a dynamic women's health activist from the UK. When menstruation is stigmatized, people often feel too embarrassed to talk about menstrual problems or to seek help, and that is one of the reasons why ending period shame is so important. One way to combat period poverty and the stigma surrounding menstruation is by fostering open conversations and providing accurate information. And that is exactly what we'll be doing in the next segments. Up next, we'll focus on understanding the menstrual cycle, what's typical, what's not, and when to seek medical advice. Let's break it down. Let's start with the basic question. What exactly is the menstrual cycle? According to the Mayo Clinic, the menstrual cycle is a monthly series of changes the body undergoes to prepare for pregnancy. Each month, one of the ovaries, which are the organs that store eggs, releases an egg in a process called ovulation. If the egg isn't fertilized, the uterus, where a fertilized egg would develop, sheds its lining, resulting in menstruation. This natural process, also called menstrual period, plays an important role in overall well-being as it reflects hormonal balance and reproductive health. Typically, a regular menstrual cycle is a positive sign of good health, while changes in cycle length, flow, or pain levels can sometimes signal potential health concerns. Now, When do most people experience their first period? Known as menarche, the timing of a first period varies greatly. According to the Office on Women's Health, the average age for a girl to get her first period is around age 12, but it can start anytime between 8 and 15. Generally, a first period occurs about 2 years after other puberty changes like breast development and pubic hair growth. However, there are situations in which consulting a doctor may be advisable, such as if a girl starts menstruating before the age of 8, a period hasn't started by the age of 15, or 3 years have passed since breast development began without a period starting. Now that we understand what the menstrual cycle is, let's break down its four main phases. According to the Cleveland Clinic, the cycle begins with the menstrual phase, during which the uterus sheds its lining, causing bleeding that flows through the vagina. This phase typically lasts between 2 to 7 days, depending on the individual. Following this is the follicular phase, which starts on the first day of menstruation and continues until ovulation. During this phase, estrogen levels, which is a hormone important for reproductive health, rise and thicken the uterine lining in preparation for a possible pregnancy. Follicles, which are small sacs in the ovaries containing immature eggs, also grow, and by around days 10 to 14, one follicle matures into an egg. The ovulation phase follows, usually around day 14 in a 28-day cycle, when a surge in hormones releases the mature egg from the ovary. This egg then travels down the fallopian tube, or the tube that connects the ovary to the uterus, ready for possible fertilization, marking the most fertile time in the cycle. Finally, in the luteal phase, levels of progesterone increase to prepare the uterine lining for pregnancy. If fertilization doesn't occur, hormone levels drop, signaling the start of a new cycle as the uterus prepares to shed its lining again. Now let's explore what's considered typical in a menstrual cycle and how it can vary widely between individuals. For many, a menstrual cycle ranges between 21 to 35 days, with bleeding lasting between 2 and 7 days. In the early years after menstruation begins, cycles may be longer, but as we age, cycles tend to shorten and become more regular. While some people might have a light, pain-free cycle, others may experience heavier flow or cramping, and both can still fall within the range of normal. This brings us to an important question. What distinguishes a regular period from one that might indicate a health issue? According to the Mayo Clinic, certain signs are generally seen as indicators of a regular cycle, while others might suggest an irregular or abnormal period that warrants attention. Cycles that fall between 21 to 35 days, with a moderate flow of around 30 to 40 mils or about 2 to 3 tablespoons of blood, are typically normal. Small clots less than the size of a quarter, and mild cramps manageable with over-the-counter pain relief are also common features of a regular period. However, if bleeding is so heavy that it requires changing a tampon or pad every 1 to 2 hours, if the clots are larger than a quarter, if bleeding lasts for more than 7 days, or if cycles become shorter than 21 days or longer than 35 days, it might be a sign of an irregular period. Other signs to watch for include unexpected bleeding between periods or significant changes in the cycle's usual length or flow. These symptoms may be worth discussing with a healthcare provider for further evaluation. Later in the episode, we'll be discussing menstrual disorders and other health conditions related to irregular periods. But first, let's consider some of the other factors that can influence menstrual cycles. Life changes and health choices, for example, can impact cycles significantly. Using certain types of birth control can alter the period pattern, so it's always a good idea to talk to a healthcare provider about what to expect. Additionally, as people approach menopause, it's common for cycles to become irregular again, with some experiencing months without menstruation. During the menstrual cycle, many experience physical or emotional symptoms that may vary each month. The most common is cramping, as the uterus contracts to shed its lining. Alongside cramping, people may also experience mood swings, trouble sleeping, headaches, food cravings, bloating, breast tenderness, or acne. For some, these symptoms can change over time or even fluctuate from month to month, while others may not experience them at all. To gain a better understanding of each individual's unique cycle, keeping a record can be very helpful. Tracking details such as start and end dates, flow intensity, pain levels, mood changes, and any spotting between periods can provide valuable insights. This information can be especially useful when discussing menstrual health with a healthcare provider. Now that we've covered the basics, we'll take a closer look at the different menstrual disorders in the next segment, including their symptoms and treatment options.
Hi everyone, my name's Luke, and in this segment, we will be exploring the various disorders that are associated with menstruation. To start, let's talk about dysmenorrhea. According to YaleMedicine.org, most women experience some amount of pain and discomfort associated with their period, but there's actually a medical term that describes the condition when it is uncomfortable enough to warrant treatment. That term is dysmenorrhea. Its symptoms, which can be constant or sporadic, can occur before or during the menstrual period and last throughout the cycle. Dysmenorrhea is common. More than half of women experience some degree of discomfort with their periods. And up to 15% of women with dysmenorrhea find the discomfort so disruptive and debilitating that they stay home from school or work to recuperate. People who experience dysmenorrhea may experience the following symptoms: menstrual cramps, throbbing or achiness in the lower abdomen, or pain that radiates to the legs or thighs, and that's just to name a few. When dysmenorrhea pain is too intense to be managed with lifestyle changes or over-the-counter medications, the following may be prescribed: oral contraceptives that contain both estrogen and progestin, which help to suppress ovulation and may reduce symptoms. Other methods of hormonal contraception, such as the patch, ring, or shot, or long-acting reversible methods, such as the intrauterine device, also known as an IUD. Another common disorder associated with menstruation is endometriosis. Again, according to Yale Medicine, endometriosis occurs when tissue, similar to that of the tissue found in the endometrium, which is the lining of the uterus, grows outside of the actual uterus. Among other symptoms, it can cause chronic pelvic pain, painful periods, pain during or after sexual intercourse, as well as infertility. In addition to pelvic symptoms, research shows that women with endometriosis have higher rates of depression and anxiety than those who do not have the condition. They often experience fatigue and are at an increased risk for developing cardiovascular disease. The condition often goes undiagnosed or misdiagnosed for years, partly because its symptoms can vary greatly and may be caused by other conditions. Also, a definitive diagnosis requires surgery, which is invasive and in rare cases can cause complications. In addition to dysmenorrhea and endometriosis, there is also PCOS, which stands for polycystic ovary syndrome. According to healthlinkbc.ca, PCOS is a hormone imbalance that can affect ovulation. It can cause problems with your period and make it hard to get pregnant. PCOS may also cause other symptoms such as weight gain, acne, or hair growth on the face or body. If it isn't treated, over time it can lead to serious health problems such as diabetes and heart disease. Most of those who have PCOS grow many small cysts on their ovaries. That is why it's called polycystic ovary syndrome. PCOS is caused by hormones that are out of balance, but what causes the imbalance is not fully understood. It's possible that genetics are a factor, because PCOS seems to run in families. Your chance of having it is higher if others in your family have PCOS or diabetes. Regular exercise, healthy foods, and weight control are the key treatments of PCOS. Your doctor may also prescribe birth control pills to reduce symptoms and help regulate your periods, or fertility medicines for problems getting pregnant. Treatment can reduce symptoms and help prevent long-term health problems. So while the physical disorders we've been discussing are well known, it's also important to point out the connection between menstruation and mental health. Again, according to HealthLink BC, premenstrual syndrome, known as PMS, is a set of physical or mood-related symptoms that occur before your menstrual period each month. Symptoms begin about 1 to 2 weeks before your period starts and go away in the first few days of your period. It is common to have tender breasts, bloating, and muscle aches a few days before your period. These are normal premenstrual symptoms. But when symptoms interfere with your daily life, they are called PMS. PMS is tied to hormone changes that happen during your menstrual cycle. Doctors aren't sure why premenstrual symptoms are worse in some people than in others, but PMS can run in the family. With PMS, it's also common to feel sad, angry, irritable, or anxious. And other common symptoms that affect mood and behavior are anxiety, mood swings, decreased alertness, trouble concentrating, and withdrawal from family and friends. Most people get PMS in their mid-20s, but it can start with your first period and continue until menopause. After menopause, PMS goes away because hormones are low and don't rise and fall each month. On top of this, menstruation can also be particularly challenging for people experiencing gender dysphoria. Again, according to HealthLink BC, dysphoria means feeling distressed or uneasy. Gender dysphoria is a feeling of emotional distress because of your inner sense of your gender identity doesn't match the sex that you were assigned at birth. For transgender and some gender diverse people, their gender identity doesn't match the sex that they were assigned at birth. Many, but not all of them, can experience gender dysphoria. The symptoms of gender dysphoria may include feeling uncomfortable or upset about parts of your body that don't match your gender identity, feeling anxious or depressed as well as stressed. Some people may feel extra stressed because of discrimination in their community. Rejection, prejudice, and fear can also cause long-term stress. Usually, gender dysphoria is treated by helping someone affirm their gender identity through finding ways to express it. The types of things that help someone express their gender can vary from person to person. The symptoms of gender dysphoria can be incredibly challenging, but as society evolves, we can all be more supportive of human rights and work to reduce the challenges of menstruation for anyone who is experiencing it. We'd like to thank you for listening to this segment. We hope you've found it informative, and there is still so much to learn surrounding the issues of menstrual health, mental health, and gender identity. Thanks for listening.
Having discussed the emotional challenges linked to menstruation, it's important to explore ways to manage them. In the next segment, Stella will share practical strategies for maintaining emotional well-being throughout the menstrual cycle.
Let's take a break to talk about some tips and strategies for maintaining emotional well-being during your menstrual cycle. First, everyone's periods are different and may need different interventions to help. Often the side effects of your menstrual cycle only last the length of your period. However, if the feelings of sadness persist or become overwhelming, talk to your doctor as they may be able to prescribe medications such as antidepressants or contraceptives such as birth control pills, which help stop the hormonal fluctuation you have over your period. However, let's go on to the tips and strategies. One of the best things to do is to try to be active for at least 30 minutes a day. Even though finding the motivation may be hard during your time of the month, even just going for a walk can increase your body's serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine in the brain, which helps with the feelings of sadness, irritability, and anxiety. Another thing we can do to help maintain emotional well-being is being mindful of our diets during menstruation. Often during our periods, we may crave sugary or salty foods or even high-carb foods, and these may even temporarily boost our serotonin levels. However, once these effects wear off, you may find yourself in a deeper sadness than before. So instead, we should be eating fatty fish or other foods high in omega-3 fatty acids, foods that are high in calcium such as milk, yogurt, or leafy greens, vitamin B, which can be found in fruit, fish, and chicken, and we should be limiting the amount of alcohol and caffeine we're intaking. These all have been found to help with PMS-related feelings of sadness and irritability and anxiety. Now, I'm not saying to cut out all sweet treats, but just try to balance them out with food that may help maintain your mood. Another thing that is known to affect your mood is sleep, and this can even affect your mood weeks away from your period. So ensuring you get the recommended amount of sleep is essential for maintaining well-being. Lastly, unmanaged stress can worsen mood swings during your period, so using deep breathing, meditation, or even yoga are great ways to calm your body and mind. Doing things to keep your mind distracted can also help. It may not be easy, but it can be effective, so watch a funny movie, spend time with friends or family, or schedule a fun activity.
If you're just tuning in now, this is A Sound Constitution on CHLY 101.7 FM, a show where we focus on health topics important to our community. In today's episode, we're diving into mental health and working to break the stigma surrounding it. Before we proceed, I just want to remind our listeners that all information provided on our show is for educational purposes only and does not replace the advice of your primary healthcare professional. Thank you, Stella, for sharing some tips and strategies for our listeners. As Stella mentioned, nutrition also plays an important role in supporting both emotional and physical health during the menstrual cycle. To further explore this, we will be playing an audio from a YouTube video titled How to Eat for Your Menstrual Cycle by Tracy Lockwood Beckerman, a registered dietitian nutritionist and women's health expert from New York City. In the video, Tracy explains how adjusting your diet at different stages of the menstrual cycle can help manage symptoms and support overall well-being. Let's listen to her insights.
Hi, I'm Tracy Lockwood Beckerman. I'm a registered dietitian in New York City, and it's my job to help you figure out what to eat and why. When you think of dealing with your menstrual cycle, certain remedies probably come to mind. Advil or Motrin, hot water bottles and patches, taking a warm bath. You might not think food has anything to do with managing your cycle, unless you're talking about that giant bowl of chocolate ice cream that always seems to come to mind at a certain time of the month. But turns out eating has a lot to do with your menstrual health. Eating with your cycle in mind can help balance your hormones, ease the pain of cramps, regulate your cycle, and more. In this episode of You vs. Food, I'll help you navigate what foods will actually support your hormones and cycle. Some people call me a psychopath. These are some science-backed tips that you can use to alleviate PMS, banish bloat, and other period symptoms, and increase your energy throughout your cycle. Let's start with what to eat when you feel those first PMS symptoms coming on. You know, when you feel a little more cranky and start to get a little bit more bloated. Eat magnesium-rich foods. During the last 7 to 10 days of your cycle, that's before your period, get your magnesium in. It'll help fight fatigue, and it will help also squash pain associated with cramps. Magnesium is naturally found in foods like spinach, pumpkin seeds, and even dark chocolate. Yes. Eat fiber-rich foods for constipation and bloating. When you're hella cranky and your fave pants are fitting kinda weird, it's time to choose foods high in fiber to limit PMS-related constipation and bloating. Fiber equals gut health, which equals bowel regularity, which means see you later bloating. Eat plenty of berries, dark leafy vegetables, and whole grains. Hot tip, if you don't drink enough water to flush all those fiber-rich foods through your gut, you may experience even more bloating and cramps. Yikes! So, keep your body going like a well-oiled machine and drink that H2O. Up your vitamin D, calcium, and B6 to boost mood. Vitamin D plays a critical role in reproductive health and mood regulation and has been a hot-button topic in its relation to PMS. Research has shown that women who ate a diet high in vitamin D reduced their risk of PMS by 40%, and studies suggest that consuming daily doses of vitamin D and calcium supplements may help to limit mood swings and decrease anxiety and stress. Foods like eggs with cheese, yum, or salmon with bok choy will set you up for the perfect combo of calcium and vitamin D light. Don't forget vitamin B6. Lots of research has found that vitamin B6 can manage PMS symptoms. The vitamin synthesizes more feel-good neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin to turn that frown upside down. Seek out foods like bananas, brown rice, and eggs. Make sure you're getting enough zinc. This nutrient plays a vital role in regulating the menstrual cycle and making sure all hormones are working properly. In fact, zinc helps to power up thyroid hormones that are essential in regulating the menstrual cycle. Plus, a lack of zinc can disrupt normal ovulation and can prevent the release of an egg. So sprinkle your life with zinc by eating more pumpkin seeds, shellfish, and legumes. Let's move on to the changes you can make when Auntie Flo officially comes to town. Oh, hello, Aunt Flo. Increase iron and vitamin B12 intake for fatigue. When blood loss occurs due to the shedding of the uterine lining during menstruation, it's time to pump up the iron stat. If you experience a heavy flow, too much iron may be escaping your body, leaving your red blood cells low and your brain feeling foggy. To restore your vibrance and pizzazz, eat foods like cooked spinach, apricots, meats, tofu, lentils, and oysters. Oyster happy hour, anybody? For more efficient iron absorption, pair plant-based iron-rich foods with foods high in vitamin C. Vitamin B12 can also dip low through period-related loss, causing you to feel exhausted. Eating foods like clams, salmon, tuna, or fortified soy products will balance vitamin B12 levels. Omega-3 fatty acids have anti-inflammatory effects, which may help to limit the pain associated with the natural release of prostaglandins from the uterus. Prostaglandins are lipids that create normal inflammation, but in excess can basically make your cramps feel even worse. Yikes! Flax seeds, walnuts, salmon, or omega-3 enriched eggs will do the trick to help reduce inflammation and beat back those pesky cramps. Keep your blood sugar and carb intake balanced. Eating every 3 to 4 hours can help to manage blood sugar levels. This will help to avoid cortisol spikes or mood swings that may occur. And for my low-carb or keto fans, just a warning that eating low in carbs can spike your cortisol levels, which may make your hormones go haywire. Limit super stimulating foods. During PMS, it may be helpful to moderate or even eliminate caffeinated beverages. Yes, that means your matcha latte, to help reduce feelings of anxiety or jitteriness. Remember, everyone's bodies are uniquely different through their menstrual cycle. So make sure to take specific and personalized and even graphic and descriptive notes in an app or journal about your symptoms, mood changes, and energy levels. You know, sometimes we just gotta go with the flow.
Again, that was an audio from a YouTube video titled How to Eat for Your Menstrual Cycle by Tracy Lockwood Beckerman, a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and women's health expert. Now that we have explored the role of diet in menstrual health, let's shift focus to how different cultures embrace menstruation. In the next segment, my co-host Cedric will explore various menstrual practices from around the world and discuss the importance of maintaining proper menstrual hygiene.
What is meant by menstrual hygiene? According to an article from the National Library of Medicine, menstrual hygiene is defined as the principle of maintaining cleanliness of the body during menstrual flow. It requires basic supplies such as appropriate clothes, soakage material, water, soap, and toilet facilities with privacy. So why is menstrual hygiene important for health and comfort? Well, according to the World Bank Group, poor menstrual hygiene can lead to serious health risks such as reproductive and urinary tract infections, which can result in future infertility and birth complications. Some of these serious health risks are pelvic inflammatory disease and toxic shock syndrome. Pelvic inflammatory disease is an infection of the female reproductive system and is caused by a bacterial infection that spreads from the vagina or the cervix to reproductive organs higher up in the body, such as the womb, fallopian tubes, and ovaries. Toxic shock syndrome is a cluster of symptoms involving many body systems. It is caused by toxins released into the bloodstream by certain bacterial infections. These toxins are spread to organs, which can cause severe damage and illness. Besides these serious health risks, poor menstrual hygiene can also present itself as itching or rashes in the perineal region and bad odor. A lack of means for hygienic management of menstruation has also been shown to cause discomfort and psychological stress, and can contribute to the shame experienced by women and girls due to menstruation-related taboos and stigma. Additionally, neglecting to wash hands after using menstrual products can spread infections such as hepatitis B and thrush. However, when girls and women have access to safe and affordable sanitary materials to manage their menstruation, the risk of infection has been shown to decrease. The availability of clean and suitable menstruation products ensures not only physical comfort, but also psychological comfort, as it gives women the confidence to go about their daily lives without worrying about odors or leaks. By encouraging good menstrual hygiene, it helps to eliminate the stigma around this topic and lessens the stress and worry that can come with menstruation. Now, I would like to discuss how menstruation is embraced in different cultures. According to the Quebec Society, a non-profit organization that aims to shine a light on menstrual health in Indigenous communities, many Indigenous people refer to menstruation as their moon time. In Indigenous culture, the moon is connected to women's sacredness, as well as to the roles and responsibilities that come with being a woman. The moon is referred to as Grandmother Moon and controls the tides and the waters of the earth, as well as the waters inside women. An excerpt from the book Moontime Prayer by Cindy Godet explains the connection of the moon to the menstrual cycle. Once every 28 days, the fullness of the Grandmother Moon illuminates the night sky. This is also when the spirit of the moon dances within women. Every 28 days, her vibrant red blood flows to nourish the Earth Mother. As women, we are connected to Grandmother Moon and she hears us. Our moon time cycle is linked with her. It is through her that we receive our strength to go inward, and it is with the assistance of Grandmother Moon that all life pushes forth, the plants, the trees, and babies. Remembering the sacredness of our moon time and our womanhood is how we create harmony in our own heart, in our family, and in our entire community. While this Indigenous view of menstruation is positive and empowering for women, other cultures have more negative views of menstruation. For example, from an article focusing on dialogue around different menstrual practices, a woman born in Nepal describes her experience with menstruation. This participant states that while she was growing up, she saw her mother and her sisters follow more than 40 types of restrictions related to what women can eat, touch, or participate in while menstruating. She also saw an annual cleansing ritual called Rishi Panchami when she was 8 years old. Rishi Panchami is an annual Hindu festival for purifying the contamination caused by menstruation throughout the year. Menstruating women and girls perform this purification ritual so that they can be rid of God's curse of contamination. The participant describes the painful experience of seeing her 3 sisters put in a shed during their first and second period, and that she became determined to deny her culture's restrictions on menstruation. While there are many more views of menstruation to discuss, I cannot discuss them all in this short segment. If you wish to know more about menstruation practices in different cultures, our references will be in our show notes. So what supports are available for menstrual health? Well, the charity Period Purse offers free menstrual education and training sessions for all genders in English and French, virtually as well as in person in select locations. These training sessions are developed in partnership with medical professionals and led by trained facilitators. These sessions can be booked for free on their website, which will be linked in our show notes. Another website called yourperiod.ca is connected to the Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists of Canada, and it has many resources around sexual and menstrual health and contains important information around menstruation and what is normal during your period and what is not. Additionally, the charitable organization Action Canada for Sexual Health and Rights has an access line that is accessible 7 days a week and is available for questions about sexual health, pregnancy options, and safer sex. This line can be reached at 1-888-642-2725, and that is 1-888-642-2725. All of the information discussed on this phone line is confidential and nothing is recorded. Thank you for listening to this segment. All of our references for this segment can be found in our show notes.
Thank you, Cedric, for sharing fascinating insights into various menstrual practices from around the world and emphasizing the importance of proper menstrual hygiene. Before we wrap up this episode, let's hear from Dr. Danielle Jones, also known as Mama Dr. Jones, as she debunks some of the most important myths about period in her YouTube video titled OBGYN Debunks Top 5 Myths About Periods. Dr. Jones is an obstetrician and gynecologist as well as an educational content creator who focuses on women's health. Let's take a listen.
Hey y'all, welcome back. I'm Mama Dr. Jones, a board-certified OBGYN, a mom to 4, and today we're going through the top 5 myths about periods that I hear repeated all over the internet. The last one might surprise you a little bit. Let's jump into the period myths. Myth number 1, you can't get pregnant on your period. This is a total lie. It is true that it is less likely for you to get pregnant if you have sex during your menstrual cycle. However, it is not impossible. Depending on how long you bleed at what point in that time you have unprotected sex, and at what point in your cycle you ovulate, there could be an overlap there. We've talked about this before, but sperm can live in the uterus and fallopian tubes for 5 days. That means they can be there long after the unprotected sex. And that means if you ovulate in that 5 days, you could get pregnant still. So never assume that you can't get pregnant if you're having sex with someone who can get you pregnant. Make sure you're using protection or taking some form of contraception if you don't want to make a baby. Myth number 2, periods only happen once a month. This is not quite true. Your body doesn't know what day of the week it is, what month of the year it is, etc. So although you might have a period every month, depending on your cycle length, and when we say cycle, we don't just mean the time you're having your period or having menses, we mean from day 1 of bleeding until the next day before you have a period again. That's your whole cycle. And those can range from anywhere from like 25 to 40 days. So if you have a longer cycle, meaning 40 days from the first day of your period to the day before you start again, then you may have a whole month where you don't have a period. Say you have a period the last week of February, you may not have a period for all of March. So the important thing here is that you're keeping track of your menstrual cycle using a calendar or an app. What you want to do is just make sure it's coming at relatively consistent times. A little bit of variation is okay, but just keep track of it by documenting the first day of bleeding. You may find that you go a little longer than 28 days between cycles, and in that case, you may very well have a month eventually where you just don't have a period. The important thing is making sure that if you have a month where you don't have a period, that very early the next month you do have a period. And you may have a month that you have 2 periods. If your cycles are 25 days apart and you start on the first day of March, then you may have another period before the month of March is completely over. So it just totally depends on the length of your menstrual cycle. Saying that this is a monthly event is just a easy way to kind of keep track of it, because you should be having a period about once a month, but there is some variation to that. So don't get so married to the idea of a month that you aren't tracking your cycles. The best thing you can do is just keep track, empower yourself to know how long your cycles are, and if something is not normal, let your doctor or advanced practice provider know. Myth number 3, you can't or shouldn't do a certain activity because you're on your period. This one ranges from dancing to swimming to riding horses to being around certain animals to bathing to using cold water. I have heard all of them. And the truth is, none of this matters. You are living in 2021, unless you're watching this in another year, in which case you're living in that year. And we have the ability to use menstrual products which allow you to have the freedom to do the things you feel like and want to do during your cycle. There is nothing that is specifically off limits just because you're having a menstrual cycle. There are so many period products out there, and so you have a lot of options. You can use whatever you want to make sure that you can do whatever you want when you're on your period. A long time ago, before we had good period products, people were told to be less active because there wasn't a way to control bleeding. But now we don't have to do that. And anything that you've heard from your Aunt Gertrude about what you can and can't do on your period is nonsense. Do what you want, do what you feel like, live your life. Your period should not be interrupting your daily life. So that brings us to myth number 4, which is periods are supposed to be painful. This one drives me absolutely bonkers because I hear people say it actually both ways. Periods are supposed to hurt, or periods are supposed to not have any pain associated with them at all. And it's both nonsense. Some people don't have cramping, and that's okay. Some people have some cramping, and that's okay. What's not okay is if you have pain or cramping during your cycle or any other symptom during your cycle that keeps you from living your normal day-to-day life and doing the activities that you want to do. So in that last one, we were talking about you should be able to do anything you want to do while you're on your period. If you can't, because your period is really heavy, your period is really painful, you have other PMS symptoms, depression symptoms, anxiety symptoms, headaches, all of these things can sometimes be associated with your menstrual cycle, and you should let us know because there is something that we can do to help with those things. So, should you have pain? Not necessarily. Should you have an absence of pain? Not necessarily. You should have no cramping, or cramping that is mild enough that you can still do your day-to-day life and not keep you from living your life like you want to do that. And myth number 5, this one is going to break some hearts. It broke my heart too. And it is menstrual cycles sync up with the other people you live with who have periods. And unfortunately, it's just not true. This is called the McClintock effect, and it was originally described in the literature, I think in the 70s, when this person who was researching it identified that maybe menstrual cycles were syncing up if people lived in the same household. It has been studied and studied and studied since then with no ability to actually reproduce any valid results that show that it actually happens. I understand why it gets repeated because it's kind of cool to think that maybe we do actually do that and wonder like how it happens. I am even guilty of repeating this to people in the past before I started looking into it, but it doesn't look like it's true. The evidence is pretty overwhelming, unfortunately, that this doesn't happen. So if it doesn't happen, and there was only this one not very good and not reproducible study from a long time ago that said it might, why does it keep getting repeated? Aside from the fact that I was saying earlier, where it just would be kind of neat if we could believe in this, it also is a matter of coincidence. If we take a bunch of people and we assume, which I know we just talked about this, everybody's cycle length isn't the same, but for demonstration purposes, we're going to pretend everybody has a period every 28 days and they all bleed for 7 days. At some point, you're going to have overlap in those cycles. And when you add in the differences in cycle length, it gets even more convoluted. You're probably going to have days where your cycles overlap no matter what, because people are cycling at different times and at different lengths and for different amounts of days and all of these things. And so you're going to see overlap. I don't know if I'm explaining that well. I feel like I'm definitely off on my explanations today, but I hope that makes sense. It is a matter of coincidence, unfortunately, and not of uterine magic.
Again, that was Dr. Danielle Jones, also known as Mama Dr. Jones, in her YouTube video titled OBGYN Debunks Top 5 Myths About Periods. And with that, we're wrapping up today's episode on menstrual health. Remember, staying informed is key to taking control of your health. Knowledge empowers you to make confident decisions, break free from stigma, and advocate for your well-being. A big thank you to my co-hosts Stella, Luke, and Cedric for sharing their knowledge and providing facts about menstrual health. As we wrap up this season, we want to express our gratitude to our listeners for your continued support. Stay tuned for next season, where we'll be diving into new health topics and continuing our mission to bring important health conversations to the community. For details and show notes from today's episode, or to follow along with what's coming up next season, check out our Facebook page at A Sound Constitution and our Instagram at CHLY A Sound Constitution. If you've missed parts of this episode or would like to listen to this episode or episodes from our past shows, check out our YouTube and Spotify at A Sound Constitution. Thanks again for being with us this season, and we can wait to share more with you next time.